when they dragged the human into the Hall of Judgment, even the stars outside seemed to lean closer. Because no one in the Zorathian Empire had ever seen a queen hold a trial for a servant species before, and no one had ever seen Queen Sorelith look so certain that mercy itself needed to die. The chamber burned with floating fire orbs and silver banners. Nobles watched from crystal tiers, and in the center stood Elias Varin, wrists bound in shackles of light, uniform torn, blood on his jaw. Human eyes still bright with defiance, he was accused of treason, sabotage, and murdering 3 royal sentinels. But the charge that poisoned the air was the rumor that he had done it to save Princess Liara from men who served the crown itself. And when Sorelith rose from her black throne and pointed toward him, the room forgot how to breathe. Because everyone knew this would either restore the Empire's authority or crack it down the middle. The prosecutor began with cruelty. He spoke of human ambition, of primitive blood wrapped in a royal uniform, of how Elias had been lifted from a wreck colony, educated, armed, trusted, only to repay that trust with betrayal. Holograms unfolded above the floor, smoke-filled corridors, dead sentinels, stolen command ciphers, then the final image. Princess Liara in a sealed hangar, Elias standing before her with a pulse rifle in his hands. And the court murmured as one, because on the surface it was enough. Enough to kill him 10 times over. Sorelith asked whether he had raised a weapon in the royal wing. He said yes. Whether he had overridden crown security? Yes. Whether he had killed 3 sentinels sworn to the throne? And Elias lifted his chin and said, I killed 3 men, yes. But they had already stopped serving the throne when they tried to sell your daughter to the Directorate fleet waiting beyond the moon. Outrage detonated across the chamber. Liara did not move, but her hand tightened around her chair until the knuckles whitened. Because she knew he was telling the truth, she had seen loyal men become hunters, had watched her rescue turned into an abduction over palace comes, and still she had stayed silent. Because in the Zorathian court truth without proof was just another form of suicide. But the room had not yet learned how dangerous silence could become. Sorelith demanded evidence, and the prosecutor smiled. Forged logs appeared, edited surveillance, obedient witness accounts. Each piece tightening the cage around the human. Elias never begged. And that frightened Liara more than any plea could have. Because men who expected rescue looked toward doors, he looked only toward the throne. Then the queen asked the question the court wanted. If you acted to protect the princess, why did you not come to me? Elias laughed and said, because your seal was on the order. The hall went silent. Sorelith did not move. But something dark passed through her gaze. Elias went on. The extraction team carried sovereign clearance. The gates were open from the inner ring. The princess was not targeted by rebels. She was being sold by officials who knew exactly which cameras would sleep. Now the nobles were not murmuring. Now they were calculating. Because palace trials were theater until suspicion touched the throne. And once it did, every smile became a blade. Then the impossible happened. Princess Liara stood. Protocol shattered by the scrape of one chair against crystal. Her voice was calm. The human speaks true. She stepped down from the dais, white robes trailing like surrender, and war together. Ministers hissed her name. Guards shifted. The high priest cried that heirs of the bloodline could not enter the witness floor. She ignored them all and crossed the throne room toward Elias. Every step a public severing of safety. When she reached him, she stripped the jeweled rings from her fingers and placed the last into the chamber light. A hidden record unfolded above them, untouched footage. Sentinels entering her quarters without summons, covert talks with directorate envoys, and at the center of it all, an order bearing the Queen's living seal. but stamped during the exact hour Saralith had been in conclave before 10,000 witnesses. The seal had been stolen, not granted, and suddenly the most dangerous man in the room was no longer the human in chains, but the advisor standing nearest the throne. Panic moved faster than reason. The prosecutor ran for the side exit. A guard captain drew on Liara. Elias moved before thought could catch him, shackles and all. He threw himself between the shot and the princess. Blue fire ripped through his shoulder and drove him to one knee. Then the throne room exploded. Loyalists against conspirators, crystal shattering. Nobles screaming beneath falling banners. Saralith herself killed the captain with a scepter blade through the chest, reminding the Empire why she had taken the throne in war. Guards swarmed the prosecutor. Sparks rained through the chamber like metal snow. And through it all, Liara knelt beside Elias, hands pressed to his wound, asking, "Why would you still protect me after I let them chain you?" Elias managed to grin through the pain and said, "Because where I come from, princess, we do not measure loyalty by how safely it is returned." That line would be remembered long after empires changed their flags, because in that instant, every species in the chamber saw the same thing. Not a servant race clawing upward, but a human choosing sacrifice when survival would have excused betrayal. And the old imperial myth of superiority began to die on the blood-lit floor. When the fighting ended, the dead were counted. The conspiracy was dragged into daylight, and history remembered the day more simply than the court ever could. A queen placed a human on trial expecting an example, and instead placed her empire under judgment. Before the assembled houses, Saralith broke Ilias's shackles with her own hands, named him innocent, named him Shield of the Crown, and voided the ancient statutes that chained humanity beneath every other species. Outrage would come later, resistance too. But something irreversible had already happened, because Liara took Ilias's arm and helped him stand before the court that had wanted him dead. And every witness in that chamber saw the future arrive in the shape of a wounded human refusing to bow. The stars burned cold beyond the glass, the banners hung in tatters. And for the first time in generations, the Empire looked at a human, looked